Hello, and welcome to a very important problem set 19. This is very important because our lesson today is on exponents. So what is an exponent? Well, if I have 2 times 2, so the same number multiplied by itself, I can say that that is 2 squared. If I have 2 times 2 times 2, that would be 2 cubed. The exponent says that I'm repeating that same thing over and over and over again. So when I work with things like this, 3 squared, that would be the same as 3 times 3, which is 9. Simple enough. What about 3 cubed? Well, that's 3 times 3 times 3. 3 times 3 is 9, times 3 is 27. What about 3 to the 4th? Well, it's going to be 27. 3 times 3 times 3 times 3. That's 81. Often when I get to the higher powers, I like to just look and say these two are going to be 9 times 9, which is 81. Simple enough. Next, I have negative 3 to the 4th. Now, how do I deal with that? Well, the minus sign, since it's not in parentheses, will stay. Okay? If the minus is in parentheses, we have to treat it differently. But right now, this is more like just saying subtracting 3 to the 4th. So I can cover it up with my hands, find 3 to the 4th, and then remember that I have a minus sign there. Now, let's talk about when that is not the case. So if you have in parentheses, things change a little bit. So negative 3 squared is the same as negative 3 times negative 3. Since the minus is in the parentheses, I have multiplied it twice. And so minus minus becomes positive 9 because two negatives make a positive. Let's try it this one. Negative 3 cubed. This time I have negative 3 times negative 3 times negative 3, which is negative 27. Why? I have 3 minus signs, and 3 times 3 times 3 is 27. Now, this one is a little tricky. How do I deal with this? Well, the general rule, if you haven't seen it already, if you have a minus under parentheses and it's to an even power, then it comes out positive. If you have a negative to an odd power, it comes out negative. So if I just had negative 3 to the 4th, I would expect a positive because I'm going to have 4 minus signs. So this would be positive, but I have this extra minus sign outside. So if I evaluate negative 3 to the 4th, let's do that first, and we'll add the minus sign later. This gives me positive, positive. We already know that 3 to the 4th is 81. But if I put a minus sign in front of that, that is the only way this becomes negative. Okay. Otherwise, it should be positive. So they're going to give you problems that look like this. Negative 3 cubed minus negative 3 squared plus negative 2 squared. Okay, my first step is to deal with parentheses. Everything inside the parentheses is simplified, so now I go to exponents. So what am I going to do? I'm going to simplify each exponent, but I'm going to leave the signs in front. So this minus is not in parentheses, so that's part of our addition and subtraction step. The same here. This plus stays outside. Now I'm going to evaluate 3 cubed, 3 times 3 times 3, which is 27. Negative 3 squared, we already did that one, right? It's right here, positive 9. And I'm going to leave that one in parentheses because that one's a little strange. And I'm going to leave this one, well, let's see, negative 2 squared. 2 times 2 is 4, so I know it has a 4 in it. Is it going to be negative or positive? That's right, it's going to be positive because I have 2 minus signs. So now I have negative 27 minus positive 9, which is the same as minus 9, plus 4. I'll do my addition and subtraction left to right. Negative 27 minus 9 is negative 36, plus 4 is negative 32. All Righty. So next, let's talk about roots. So you can also take the square roots, which is the opposite of an exponent. So what's the square root of 64? Well, what I'm asking is what number times itself equals 64? The answer is 8. 8 times 8 is 64, so the square root of 64 is 8. What about the fourth root of 16? Now I'm asking what number times itself 4 times would be 16. So in this case, it's going to be 2 because 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8, times 2 is 16. All right, and so on. Now it gets a little trickier when we get our negative powers. You can only have, for now, negatives in odd powered, right? We can never get a negative number out of an even power. We can only get negatives out of odd powers, just like we found there. So what is the cubed root of negative 27? I just pointed it out for you. That's right here. The answer is negative 3. So deal with the minus sign, and then figure out what number times itself 3 times is 27. Now there's one last part to this lesson, which is a little tricky, so we'll review it before moving on to the lesson and or homework. And that is this. We have to evaluate pm squared minus z cubed. Okay, we've been doing this before, but now we have powers, and they give us p equals 1, m equals negative 4, and z equals negative 2. So I can't emphasize this enough. When you're plugging in, make sure you plug in parentheses. So p is 1, m is negative 4, z is negative 2. Okay, you have to plug in parentheses, otherwise you will not get the correct answer. So we're going to do all of our exponents first, so I'll leave the 1, even though it doesn't really do much. Negative squared is going to be a positive. 4 squared is 16. Minus negative cubed is still going to be a negative because it's an odd power. 2 cubed is 8. 2 times 2 is 4 times 2 is 8. Now I'm going to do multiplication and division. 1 times 16 is 16. Negative negative makes a positive. Now I'll do addition and subtraction. This is 24. And that, my friends, is lesson 19.